On April 14, 2026, in Kharkiv Oblast, soldiers from Ukraine's 3rd Separate Assault Brigade did something that has never been done before in the history of warfare. They captured a fortified Russian position, a thick-walled school in Kupiansk, every window covered with anti-drone netting, without a single human soldier setting foot on the ground during the assault. No infantry charge, no men sprinting across open terrain under fire, no bodies in the mud. Aerial drones suppressed the defenders, unmanned ground vehicles rolled up to the walls, and the position fell to robots. President Zelenskyy stood on a stage lined with ground robots, drones, and missiles and said, "For the first time in the history of this war, Ukrainian warriors captured an enemy position using exclusively unmanned platforms." Then he dropped the number, 50,000. That's how many unmanned ground vehicles Ukraine plans to field on the front line in 2026. 50,000 robots on a 1,200-kilometer front, delivering ammunition, evacuating wounded soldiers, running electronic warfare, and, increasingly, conducting assault operations that used to cost human lives. In March alone, Ukrainian forces completed over 9,000 UGV missions. That's up from 2,900 in November 2025. The steepest adoption curve for a new weapons category that any military in the world has ever recorded. Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov's stated goal is stunningly ambitious. 100% of frontline logistics should be performed by robotic systems. Not some logistics, not most logistics, all of it. Every ammunition run, every water delivery, every casualty evacuation on the zero line, the most dangerous meters of Earth on the planet, handled by machines instead of men. Russia has spent 4 years throwing human bodies into the meat grinder. Ukraine's answer? Stop sending bodies, send robots instead. Let's talk about why this matters, in the coldest, most brutal terms possible. Ukraine's single greatest vulnerability is manpower. Russia has 147 million people, Ukraine has 37 million, and millions have fled as refugees. Russia can absorb catastrophic casualties through waves of mobilization, prisoner recruitment, and North Korean reinforcements. Ukraine cannot. Every Ukrainian soldier killed or wounded is a loss that gets harder to replace. The front line in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia is a no-man's land of constant FPV drone surveillance. Any soldier who steps into the open, to carry ammunition forward, to drag a wounded comrade back, to deliver food and water to a trench position, becomes a target within seconds. Drone operators on both sides hunt for exactly this kind of movement. A soldier carrying an ammo crate across 200 meters of open ground is essentially volunteering to appear on a Telegram compilation video. Over 22,000 unmanned missions in the last quarter alone have kept an equivalent number of Ukrainian soldiers out of that kill zone. Each mission that a robot runs instead of a human being is a life that doesn't end in a trench. That's not an abstraction, that's a math problem. And Ukraine is solving it by replacing the most dangerous variable in the equation, the human, with something expendable. A Bizon-L logistics robot costs under $20,000. It can carry 300 kilograms over a 50-kilometer range. It runs on battery or hybrid power. It doesn't need food. It doesn't need sleep. It doesn't have a family waiting for it to come home. It doesn't get PTSD. It doesn't hesitate under fire. If it gets destroyed, you build another one in a factory in 2 weeks. You can't build another soldier. You can't replace the 20 years of memories in his mother's head. Zelenskyy understands this at a fundamental level. Everyone must understand, he said in his April 27th address. This is about saving lives. Let's get specific about what 50,000 UGVs on the front line actually looks like. The current UGV fleet performs 4 primary missions, and each one is expanding in scope and complexity. First, logistics. This is the bread and butter mission, carrying ammunition, water, food, batteries, and medical supplies from rear staging areas to forward trench positions. Before UGVs, this was done by soldiers running through drone-saturated terrain, often at night, often under fire. The Bizon-L, now codified under NATO standards, is the workhorse platform. It's a heavy-tracked robot designed for the mud and snow of Donbass, capable of hauling 661 pounds across rough terrain. Units using the Bizon-L report that resupply missions that previously took hours and risked multiple casualties now take minutes and risk nothing but a replaceable machine. Second, casualty evacuation. This is where the emotional impact hits hardest. A ground robot operated by Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps from a unit called Cerberus evacuated a 77-year-old woman from the Liman direction. She had been trying to flee on her own, walking past shell craters and the bodies of dead villagers. The robot was covered with a blanket bearing a handwritten message, "Grandma, get on." She climbed aboard and was driven to safety by a machine operated by a soldier sitting in a bunker kilometers away. That story makes you laugh and then immediately makes you want to cry. War is absurd, but absurd solutions that save lives are the best kind. If someone told me in 2022 that a robot with a blanket would be rescuing grandmothers from artillery zones, I would have assumed it was a Pixar movie pitch, not a battlefield report. Third, equipment recovery. The 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade has used tracked robots to retrieve disabled drones and damaged equipment from the battlefield under fire. Equipment that would otherwise be abandoned or recovered at the cost of a soldier's life gets dragged back by a machine that doesn't care about bullets. Fourth, and this is the one that changes everything, combat operations. The Kharkiv assault in February 2026 was the proof of concept. Ukrainian forces coordinated aerial drones with UGVs to clear a fortified Russian position in Kupiansk. The K2 Brigade has stood up what analysts describe as the world's first dedicated UGV battalion. Assault UGVs, equipped with machine guns, grenade launchers, and FPV drone launchers, are now conducting direct-fire missions against Russian positions. The Ratel H UGV, a tracked assault robot, has been fitted with a fiber-optic drone launcher, allowing it to deploy FPV drones from positions too dangerous for human operators. Imagine a robot driving to within 500 meters of a Russian trench, stopping, launching an explosive drone directly into the position, and then driving away. No human exposed, no life risked. Just machines killing machines, and machines killing men who have no way to respond because they can't even see who or what is attacking them. The operations are getting more elaborate by the week. In late February 2026, Russian troops occupied a thick-walled school in Kupiansk and covered every window with anti-drone netting, a standard countermeasure against FPV attacks. Ukrainian forces responded by coordinating ground robots with aerial platforms in a combined arms assault that overwhelmed the defenses from multiple vectors simultaneously. The netting stopped the drones, it didn't stop the robots. What we're witnessing is the birth of unmanned combined arms warfare. Infantry doctrine, suppress, flank, assault, is being replicated by machines. Recon drones identify the target. Electronic warfare drones jam Russian communications. FPV drones suppress defenders. Ground robots advance and deliver direct fire, or deploy their own drone swarms. The entire kill chain runs without a single human crossing the line of departure. It's terrifying, it's revolutionary, and it's happening right now on a section of front that most people can't find on a map. None of this exists without an industrial base to produce it. And the speed at which Ukraine built that industrial base is genuinely unprecedented. In February 2022, Ukraine's ground robotics sector was essentially non-existent. 0 companies, 0 products, 0 combat experience. Today, there are over 300 ground drone companies operating within the Brave One defense tech ecosystem. Over 550 different UGV solutions have been developed. Brave One has issued 175 grants to ground drone developers. The sector went from nothing to a fully formed market in less than 4 years, during a war, under bombardment, with a workforce that's simultaneously fighting. Defense Minister Fedorov announced that the Defense Procurement Agency has signed 19 contracts worth 11 billion hryvnia, roughly $250 million, with UGV manufacturers. To stabilize the industry long-term, the ministry has begun signing contracts through 2027, giving manufacturers the certainty they need to invest in production capacity, hire workers, and scale up. The number of military units using UGVs has exploded from 67 in late 2025 to 167 by spring 2026, a 150% increase in roughly 5 months. A dedicated center for ground robotic systems is being established within the armed forces to serve as a central hub connecting manufacturers with combat units, streamlining feedback loops, and accelerating deployment. Ukraine's total digital procurement spending since January 2026 exceeds 14 billion hryvnia, about $330 million, pushing more than 181,000 drones, UGVs, and electronic warfare systems to the front through a direct digital platform that bypasses traditional bureaucratic procurement. Western militaries take years to approve a new weapon system. Ukraine does it through what is essentially a defense tech Amazon marketplace. A brigade identifies a need. A manufacturer offers a solution. Testing happens at the front. Procurement follows within weeks. The system is messy, imperfect, and occasionally chaotic, but it produces results at a speed that no Western acquisition process can match.
Drone XL's defense editor, who has covered unmanned systems for 9 years, called Ukraine's UGV adoption curve the steepest for a new weapons category I have seen. He predicted that at least one NATO country will announce a joint production line for Ukrainian ground robots before the end of 2026, with Germany or Denmark as the most likely partners. He's probably right. Ukraine isn't just building these robots for itself, it's building an export industry. Zelensky's Arms Makers Day presentation was explicitly a sales pitch. He walked a stage lined with UGVs, drones, and missiles, and the message to European governments was unmistakable. We have combat-tested hardware, we have the operators who know how to employ it, and we will sell it to you or trade it for weapons we need. Ukraine wants to become the world's leading exporter of unmanned ground warfare systems, and it has something no competitor can offer: 4 years of real-world combat data. Ihor Fedorko, executive director of the Ukrainian Council of Defense Industry, told the New York Times that the export value is tactical, not just hardware. Integrating drones, radar, and targeting systems matters less than knowing how to use them in combat. That knowledge, the hard-won, blood-bought experience of actually fighting a peer adversary with robots, is what Ukraine can offer allies that have not fought a major war in decades. NATO militaries have the money, they have the factories. What they don't have is combat experience with unmanned ground systems at scale. Ukraine has it, and at $20,000 per unit, ground robots are cheap enough that even mid-sized NATO members can afford to buy thousands. The unit economics makes sense, the tactical case is proven. The only question is how fast Western militaries can overcome their institutional inertia and start ordering. Russia has its own drone programs, it has its own UGV prototypes, but it doesn't have anything like what Ukraine is deploying at scale. Russia's approach to the front line remains fundamentally human-centric. Its assault doctrine, the so-called meat wave, still relies on sending groups of infantry across open terrain, often on motorcycles, golf carts, and civilian vehicles, to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses through sheer numbers. Russia treats its soldiers as consumable. Ukraine treats its soldiers as irreplaceable. That doctrinal difference is now manifesting in technology. Ukraine is racing to remove humans from the kill zone. Russia is racing to find more humans to throw into it. Russia has begun recruiting in African countries, offering citizenship in exchange for military service. It has expanded prisoner recruitment programs. It relies on North Korean soldiers to plug gaps in the line. Russia's electronic warfare systems can jam some Ukrainian UGVs, but fiber-optic controlled robots like the Ratel H are immune to jamming because they don't use radio frequencies. The signal travels through a physical cable. There's nothing to intercept, nothing to disrupt. Russia spent billions developing electronic warfare systems designed to neutralize radio-controlled weapons, and Ukraine made those systems irrelevant with a spool of glass fiber. Russia's FPV drones can target Ukrainian UGVs, and they do. Robots get destroyed. But the replacement calculus overwhelmingly favors Ukraine. A destroyed UGV costs $20,000 to replace. A destroyed Russian tank costs $3 million. A killed Ukrainian soldier costs everything to his family, his unit, and his country's future. By flooding the front line with 50,000 expendable machines, Ukraine is creating a war of attrition that favors the side with the cheaper, faster-to-produce assets. Russia can't win a robot war. It doesn't have the innovation pipeline, the manufacturing agility, or the combat experience with unmanned systems. It has men, and men are losing to machines. The psychological dimension matters too. Russian soldiers captured in the Kupiansk area described the experience of being attacked by unmanned platforms as deeply disorienting. You can't negotiate with a robot. You can't suppress a robot with fear. You can't shoot a warning shot at something that doesn't care about warnings. The machines just keep coming, methodically, relentlessly, indifferently. There's something uniquely terrifying about being hunted by something that has no survival instinct, no fear response, and no hesitation. It's the military equivalent of fighting a swarm of hornets that can see in the dark and never get tired. So here's where we are. A country that had 0 ground robotics companies in 2022 will field 50,000 unmanned ground vehicles in 2026. A country that was given 3 days to fall is now conducting the world's first all-robot assault operations. A country fighting the second most powerful military on Earth is replacing its most vulnerable asset, human soldiers, with expendable machines that cost less than a used car. Ukraine's defense minister says the goal is 100% robotic logistics on the front line. The president says UGVs are the next major step after drones.
The K2 Brigade has the world's first UGV battalion. And a 77-year-old grandmother was rescued from a battlefield by a robot wearing a blanket that said, "Grandma, get on." The future of warfare isn't coming. It arrived in Ukraine on a tracked chassis, carrying 300 kilograms of ammunition through the mud of Donbass at 3 a.m., while a 22-year-old operator controls it from a bunker with a PlayStation controller and a cup of coffee. So here's my question. If Ukraine can build 50,000 ground robots in a single year during a war, what's stopping NATO countries with 10 times the GDP from doing the same in peacetime? And if robotic warfare removes humans from the kill zone, does that make war more likely because the cost in human life goes down? Or less likely because the side with better technology wins before the first soldier ever reaches the front? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you're new. This channel covers the future of warfare as it happens, not after some think tank writes a paper about it. I'll see you in the next one.